Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to this evening's conversation about climate entrepreneurship. I'm Julie Raithmel, Executive Director for Audubon Florida. We're Florida's oldest statewide conservation organization, using sound science and policy savvy to solve the challenges facing our water, wildlife, habitat, and climate. I couldn't be more excited to be moderating a discussion tonight with 4 of Audubon Florida's first cohort of Florida climate entrepreneurs. These are private sector innovators who are in the business of helping Florida meet the challenges of climate change while creating jobs in Florida's emerging climate economy. Few places are as vulnerable as Florida to the challenges of climate change, from sustainable communities to artificial reef installation, next-gen energy tech to mass transit. Harnessing private sector innovation to address climate change makes smart economic sense. How we respond to climate change will determine our state's future prosperity and quality of life. These entrepreneurs are mainstreaming Florida's climate economy and the future careers that it will support. So now, as we get started, there's always a little bit of housekeeping. All right, so of course, because of the number of participants, we'll keep audience members on mute, and this will help you in the event that your dog or your kid ends up interrupting your call as you're participating. There will be closed captioning available if you'd like to turn it on. Questions will be answered at the end of the session. And you can do that by putting your question into the chat function. That's usually at the bottom of your screen. If you press the chat function button, it'll pop up a window that you can type your questions into. All right, and so with that, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So, as I mentioned earlier this summer, Audubon Florida released profiles of 8 climate entrepreneurs. We'll drop the link into chat so that you can learn more about each of them, and you can also see the link here on the screen. Tonight, we have 4 of these distinguished leaders with us to talk about why climate entrepreneurship makes economic sense, what the future holds for this growing sector, and tips for aspiring entrepreneurs in this space. Tonight's 4 entrepreneurs include Syd Kitson, who is chairman and CEO of Kitson and Partners and founder of Southwest Florida's Babcock Ranch, a planned community that prioritized renewable energy and sustainable design ahead of its time. We have Husein Cumber, Chief Strategy Officer of Florida East Coast Industries, the force behind Brightline, growing high-speed rail in Florida. We have Thomas Brown, CEO of Living Shorelines, Inc., creating 21st century solutions to coastal erosion that work with nature rather than against it. And we have Dr. Sastry Pamidi, chair and professor at Florida A&M University and Florida State University's Joint College of Engineering, innovating energy solutions and working with industry to translate research into the marketplace. So entrepreneurs, thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening. So to start out, Syd Kitson. So your community has had sustainability and solar power as a cornerstone from the start. How do you respond to those who say that meeting the challenge of climate change is too expensive, especially in the private sector? Do you think that the resilience features that you've built into your community have reduced consumer demand for your product? Did they make it less viable or competitive?
It's a great question. I've been asked that so many times, where everybody just assumes that doing the right thing costs more, and I'm here to tell you that just isn't the case. I think, first of all, as a developer, I recognize, and we all recognize, that there are certain things that we do that we need to pay attention to. We do cause certain issues with the environment and our surrounding areas when we develop property, but we can mitigate that, and we have been mitigating that, and I think people demand that. I think it's easier when you're doing a greenfield, first of all. So when you have a blank sheet of paper and you can do that from the ground up, you can mitigate those impacts, from the very beginning. And I think we're, as you mentioned, we're very proud of the sustainable initiatives that we've had. We're the first solar power town, I think, in the United States. We have 150 megawatts on our property. And that's just to put that in perspective, 700,000 panels on about 840 acres that power our town. We're very proud of that, but it took 8 years to put that together, and we have a great partner that's doing that with us. But that didn't cost us more money to do that. We have a great water quality system at Babcock Ranch, and we do mitigation for the panthers and other habitats that we've done throughout Babcock Ranch. The preservation of the wetlands is something we're extremely proud of. Instead of just clear cutting, and when you drive through Babcock, you'll see all these open areas. So what I think the important thing to understand is that some of those things cost more, some of them don't, but people are demanding it. So the payoff of all that is you sell more homes, you sell them faster, and when you do that, from an economic perspective, you can actually make more money. As a matter of fact, Babcock Ranch now is the 10th, ranked 10th in the entire United States of America for home sales this year. And that's only after about 4 or 5 years that we've actually been going forward, and we're very proud of that. So when you talk about, does it cost more? In some cases it does, some cases it doesn't. But I think people are insisting on it. I think the market is insisting on it. And if you don't do it, I think that's where it's actually going to cost you more at the end of the day.
That's really helpful. So you think that it's actually made your product more competitive? That's
no
great.
question. It's made us more competitive. We did a survey. We have now almost 5,000 people living here. And again, we just started. The number one reason people are moving here is because of the outdoor lifestyle and the sustainable aspects of what we're doing at Babcock Ranch. So people care about it. I think and it's not just the younger generation. We find it, we have a very multi-generational community here. We have a great school system. We have a public charter school that is a K through 12 that is, I think, one of the best in the state. So we have young people, and then we have the empty nesters, as you always do in Florida. And we're finding that both groups are passionate about it, and they care about it, and they take a lot of pride in it. There's civic pride here at Babcock for people to be able to talk about those things that make it sustainable. And look, people recognize what's happening in the climate. I don't think that's not a political issue. That's a fact. And anything we can do in the private sector to address it, not relying on government, but from the private sector, I think is very, very important.
That's really helpful. So Husein, it's not just about how people are living, but also how people are changing their ways of moving around our state. Of course, Brightline's high-speed rail presents new opportunities for more efficient mass transit. What do you think is next in the ways that transportation can help us to meet the challenges of climate change?
Great question, Julie, and thanks for having me as part of this panel. So, transportation is a great nexus with climate change, and I think it's important, and I know intuitively people kind of sense this, it's the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions comes from the transportation sector. So if we really want to make a dent in climate change, we have to focus on the transportation sector. And primarily they come from cars, trucks, ships, planes, and then trains, which we're in. And a little history on FEC Railway, which is the corridor that we're building Brightline on. The history of the rail line is it really opened up Florida to development. And so the unique challenge to that is we end up going through the downtowns of the major cities in South Florida and along the East Coast. That also means when we have freight trains, for example, which is where I started my career, we have the locomotive emissions, literally, being emitted in the downtown areas. And so one of the things we realized early on is we could actually switch our locomotives from diesel to natural gas, a much cleaner fuel, less emissions. And tying into what Syd said is, there are companies that I believe follow consumer behavior, and there are companies that drive consumer behavior. And so, what Syd was talking about was driving consumer behavior, not waiting until everyone demanded the type of product he was bringing to market, but actually recognizing that that's where consumer behavior is going to want to go if they're given that option. The same thing we kind of saw, like our freight customers, the Amazons of the world, the Best Buys of the world, were quickly going to be determining that they needed to have a cleaner footprint. And by having natural gas locomotives, for example, that would allow them to be able to use the service and be able to lower their carbon footprint. Similarly, then when we switched over to Brightline, we realized again, Florida is not a state where people tend to be used to taking trains like in the Northeast, right? But if we gave them that option, then consumer behavior would change because people would become more conscious of the fact that when they're getting in a car and they're driving, and they're, especially when there are only one or two people in the car, their carbon footprint is, pretty significant. And so when I think of transportation, we also have to think about frictionless transportation, right? So it's not only having our part of it, but we needed to figure out that once you get to an end location, how do you get to your actual end destination from our station, right? And so we have Brightline branded Tesla cars, for example. So we felt if we're getting people out of a vehicle that was a, gas powered vehicle to put them on a train, we need to give them an end-to-end solution that has a lower, carbon footprint. And then I think it also came down to the fuel that we use. So we use biodiesel. It's not feasible to have electric trains in South Florida going through the downtowns, but it was just a way for us to be able to find a cleaner burning fuel. I do believe what I'll kind of end with there is, I do think that there's a lot of, when we talk about transportation, I think something that gets missed, and I'm sure Syd has incorporated this into Babcock Ranch, it's also bicycle paths, it's safe pedestrian facilities, it's sidewalks, it's lights. So that way people can actually be able to move within a community without always feeling they have to be in a powered vehicle. And I think we're seeing that. I live in Jacksonville. We're seeing that in the downtown core, where I think there's also a heightened demand for people wanting to be able to move in a non-powered way. And so really what we also need to think about is how do we create those safe corridors? Because I'm sure everyone has seen the recent statistics on Florida. We're at the top in pedestrian deaths, in a lot of categories. Same thing with bicycle accidents. And so until we start actually making safe corridors for people to move, I think we're doing a disservice in being able to we're going to end up following consumer behavior instead of driving that consumer behavior where people want to switch to those modes of transportation.
That's really insightful. And it makes me think there's some opportunity there for a future entrepreneur to look at some of those local transportation solutions too, so that when you've delivered folks long distance to them, then they're able to get to their final destination locally too. That's wonderful. So Tom, we're talking about heading off climate change, but let's be honest, we're already feeling its effects. And so your business uses technology to mimic the fundamental functions of natural systems. So creating reefs and marshes to help manage erosion rather than just passing the buck with 20th century seawalls. How did you get your start in resiliency and adaptation? And what convinced you that this was a sector where you could grow and succeed?
Well, first of all, thank you, Julie, for having me.
Of course.
One of the first projects I ever did 12 years ago was with Audubon, where we took an island that was disappearing that had like 15,000 birds, nesting birds there in Tampa Bay, and it was a spoil island. It was disappearing, and they had tried everything for 25 years to solve the problem, and they took a shot with us, and we put our product in there, and we've killed the erosion. We've rebuilt the marsh area back up. Mangroves are growing, seagrass is growing in behind it. But all this started about 20 years ago with the inventor of the technology, Scott Murkowski, who is the president of Living Shorelines. He, in his backyard, typical entrepreneur's backyard, he was a Navy fighter pilot, and he was flying over it. He saw all this erosion everywhere. I mean, he had a great seat at the top. And he said he started tinkering around in his backyard and started working with it over a number of years. And then he started testing it, and he started getting patents on it. So we now have a technology and a product called a wave attenuation device. As we speak today, we're involved in the largest continuous breakwater in the United States of America, in Louisiana, 12 continuous miles. We're in the process as we speak doing our first DOT job at the Skyway, where they are trying to build the seagrass population back up and at the same time stop the new seawall that they just reinforced from disappearing again. So we've had to overcome a lot of the old engineering, let's just put some, let's just throw some rock out there. Technology, which has been around forever and a day. That's how you do it. You either do that or you pump sand in and rebuild it and put the Band-Aid on it. So Scott came up with a way to kill the energy and allow the energy the water to flow, but you have killed the force of the energy. It allows seagrasses and marshes to grow in behind it. If you have a seawall there, it stops the seawall from being beat up. Okay, it's a portable product. It can be moved around. They've been in every hurricane Florida's experienced the last 20 years, and we've never had one move an inch. So it's very unique technology. We have 4 partners involved, and we're having a ball doing it. But the most important thing is that it's very cost efficient, as opposed to rock and all that, and as opposed to dredging and coming in and every 7 or 8 years and having to redredge again. We basically stop that. We also get accretion in behind it. We don't guarantee that's going to happen, but if there's a sand source out there, we're getting accretion in behind it. We've actually rebuilt a spoil island in Louisiana for ConocoPhillips, where it was disappearing. Now it's just, we got a continuous built-in marsh. So it's just fun.
But how did you come to this though? I mean, are you a coastal engineer?
No. I'm a financial guy. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 20 years old. I haven't had a W-2 since I was 19. Okay, it's all been 1099 income. So I'm a financial guy. I've been in every boardroom in New York that a country board from Florida can be in. Okay, I did all that stuff, and I saw an opportunity 12 years ago. I saw the inventor of the technology about ready to go broke. We recognized the technology, and we said, "This really works." I happen to have a very dear friend of mine, Terry Rice, who is now deceased, who is was the head honcho at Army Corps, and I took it to Terry, and I said, "Terry, I don't know what I got here, but I know it's something." This is 12 years ago. When I took it to him, his eyes got this big. I said, "I knew I had something." He sent me to Army Corps in Jacksonville, and then the next thing they said, "You got to go to one of these trade shows." And I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to a trade show." And so that's what I'm doing now. We go to our first trade show at Beaches and Shorelines, and we're like rock stars. They were lined up outside trying to see us because they were finally seeing somebody that had a solution to a problem, but wasn't the same old.
That's
Okay?
so interesting.
I hear all these guys talking about doing new things and doing it from the ground up and so forth. But we're doing the same thing. I'm looking at it and I said, why would you dredge sand and continue to dredge sand and wait for the first hurricane to come along to take it back out to sea? It doesn't make any sense to me. So if you can kill the energy so that it doesn't go in and grab the sand,
Mhm.
And the fact that the product is portable and adaptable, where you can build onto it with sea level rise and everything, we're just kind of real comfortable where we're at right now, and we're having a ball doing it.
Well, and I love that it's a non-STEM route to the climate economy too. So very cool, very cool.
Right.
So where Tom's business model mimics natural systems, your work, Dr. Pamidi, it really is space age. It's superconducting tech has the potential to improve the efficiency of our energy storage and transmission, with applications in everything from the energy grid to transportation to wind power generation. Here's the trick though. How can entrepreneurs help move some of these revolutionary ideas from academia into application? So where have you seen this done successfully? And are there conditions that improve the likelihood of success for folks that are looking at getting into this?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Audubon Florida, for facilitating such an interesting, useful discussion and also inviting me on the panel. So as I was introduced, I'm a professor of electrical engineering. So everything we do is needs electricity. And I focus on energy efficient and clean energy technologies. One of the focuses is superconducting technologies, but I want to broadly answer the question rather than focusing on superconducting technologies. One thing many students who graduate from college or entrepreneurs do not know is there are lots of technologies developed in the university system in Florida or everywhere that have a lot of potential to create new environmentally friendly technologies, but they don't really see marketplace. Entrepreneurs have an opportunity to take these technologies that all the professors and graduate students develop and create products out of them. And one other thing that many young people do not know is federal governments and state governments have a lot of free money available for entrepreneurs to work with universities, take the technology and create products. And that is not small amount of money. Every federal agency has certain percentage of money they have to give to small businesses. So that way the small businesses or new entrepreneurs don't have to compete with big businesses. And that money is given to small businesses to take a technology, work with university partners because small businesses don't have the expertise, and also facilities. They can use university facilities to develop technologies. And they are basically getting free money for doing this, and all the intellectual product and the patents they develop, they belong to the company. Federal government doesn't ask for it. So that's such a good opportunity. I have been working with several companies in Florida and also locally in Tallahassee. And with just my involvement, we brought several $1 million in the last 4 or 5 years. And imagine how much money there's a lot of money available with federal government. They're called small business innovative grants. It is only for small businesses, so the chance of success is quite high. And university professors are very good in developing technologies, but they're honestly not good at creating products because that is not their expertise. So the partnership between university researchers and entrepreneurs is a very good, important combination to bring new technologies to marketplace while using government support. And the second part of your question is, what would help? What is conducive to small businesses to succeed? I think one of them is local and state government support to create incubators, maybe free space. Universities provide free space, and universities encourage faculty members to work with businesses. They don't have to pay even our facilities. We get some money when we support small businesses from government, and that is enough for us to support small businesses. And they can use all the expensive research facilities we have in universities to move their technologies forward and test their prototype technologies. And if they're not successful, failure is a given thing in business. You have to keep trying. Each technology will not be successful because it may not be cost competitive. But when you're doing this, you're not spending your money. So it is low risk option for entrepreneurs to take ideas from university researchers, or if they have their own idea, partner with the university professors and develop the technologies. And all local, I don't know if in Tallahassee, there is Innovation Park, MagLab, all FAMU, FSU support, encourage the faculty members to work with small businesses because we are helping businesses. And more importantly, you are training our students get the ideas of entrepreneurship and just get a taste of how businesses operate because they're working on the same problem as an entrepreneur is working with. And one important technology I want to just talk about for 2 minutes is hydrogen, green hydrogen technologies. Federal government, state government, everyone is investing billions, not millions, billions of dollars in this new technology. And particularly Florida is really strong if we really bring our entrepreneurs together, develop these technologies, because NASA has been using hydrogen for a long time. And we have a lot of expertise from NASA in Florida. And Tallahassee particularly has, and also University of Central Florida, many universities have strong related technologies. Superconducting technologies is one, hydrogen, cryogenics, high magnetic field technology, all these to come together to solve green hydrogen problem. And I think that would be the next big thing in environmental technologies, because the idea is use renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind, particularly in Florida, it would be solar energy, to produce a fuel during the day and use that fuel during the evening when sun is not there. Basically, we are using solar energy in the evening as well. And that fuel is useful for transportation, for industry, or even for generating electricity. Florida Power and Light is investing quite a bit of money, but the technologies have still gaps. There's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs to bring new technologies into this green hydrogen production, transportation, and use of hydrogen for various technologies.
So if you were an entrepreneur and you wanted to find, there's not just a catalog of, great ideas in Florida universities that somebody can look and say, that one, I want to make a business out of that one. And how should folks that want to explore this connect with the right idea and the right faculty?
I think one important first stop is each university has technology transfer office. There is an office called Technology Transfer Office. They have a list of all the innovations that universities have developed, and then they will talk about how to, it can be licensing or it could be partnerships. There are many ways of using university developed technologies. I think that is the first stop, or they can ask deans of engineering schools, and we'll be happy to talk to entrepreneurs and give them a tour of our facilities and how we can help them.
That's great. Awesome. All right. So now to our audience, what questions do you have? Are you an aspiring entrepreneur or somebody who's already working in the climate economy looking to grow, or a recent graduate exploring the career potential of this sector? Pop your questions for our panelists in the chat now. And for that matter, panelists, you may have some questions for each other. We'll have Kristen Kozik, who is Audubon's engagement manager for our conservation leadership and climate initiatives, helping to moderate the question and answer session now.
Sure. Well, while we give people a second to drop questions in the chat, I would love to see, do you all have any questions for each other about any of the responses you've heard so far?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Cumber. I think it's a great idea to have train infrastructure in Florida, particularly Disney. A lot of visitors come, not only your local people, a lot of outside people come. And if we can avoid them, help them not have to drive, that's a great thing. Are you considering maglev technology, which is one of my technologies, superconducting technologies that Japan uses for fast trains?
So not maglev. So we have for our West Coast project that will connect LA to Vegas, that is an all electric train. But the maglev technology is not where it needs to be in order to go for long distances. That doesn't mean in the future it won't come together.
Yeah.
But I think from a power source perspective, we believe we're in this transition right now, and I'm glad you brought up hydrogen. We do believe that hydrogen is really the fuel that will end up powering a lot of what we're moving today. So, for the freight train, like I mentioned, we went from diesel to natural gas. The goal is eventually I see hydrogen being the fuel that those trains can run on. And I see that across, various sectors. The one thing that you made me think of is we also talk a lot about batteries. And I think the one thing, and it's for a whole different conversation, is I think the one thing the industry is kind of ignoring right now is what do we do with all these batteries once they run out? And that's why we see hydrogen as the ultimate fuel for a lot of the transportation industry. Because if we go electric where it's battery electric, I think we're going to have a significant challenge ahead of us on when these batteries need to be disposed. What do we do with them? And that's something that I think we've kind of been ignoring a little bit. And that's why we kind of feel like that's going to that's really going to skip over and get to hydrogen pretty quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think hydrogen is the future.
Great, thank you. And Syd, I think you had a question as well. You want to go ahead?
Actually, I was just, I really find it remarkable what each of the panelists are doing. And I think what Tom is doing is, you know, I can tell he's not enthusiastic at all in all the years that he's been around. But I was curious about where you have deployed that technology, because I think that is, you know, a great solution. And kudos to you for stepping up and, you know, and taking that on in that entrepreneurial way that you've been doing your whole life.
Well, we're getting calls all over the world for that matter, but we have projects that are being developed just all over. But the most important thing is to be able to do a project, for example, for an Audubon. You immediately get credibility, number one. Number two, it's a hell of a lot easier to get a permit if Audubon's interested in it. And once you get your first permit in Tampa Bay, then the rest of them kind of flow, right? So that's a big issue, especially when you're doing relatively new technology. But the good news here is we model everything. We model it to a 20, 40, 50, 100-year storm events. We take everything into consideration so that when we go to permitting, the model sells it to the permitting agency. You don't go to DOT and do a project unless somebody's told them this stuff really does work, okay? It's pretty simple. And so DOT is excited about it. So this is our first DOT project. Yeah, and we're extremely excited about it. And we know it's going to work. Now let's get it in, and all the eyes are like this, looking to when we put it in. The big project, and we've done probably 7 or 8 projects, 9 projects in Louisiana. Low-hanging fruit. I mean, Louisiana's disappearing, right? I mean, there's spoil islands. When those spoil islands are gone, you might as well just wrap Louisiana and take it out because it's going to go away. Okay, so they have to figure out ways to stop erosion, okay, to kill the energy. So we're doing all kinds of work in Louisiana. Louisiana is a tricky state to do business in for a lot of different reasons, and I won't go into it on, you know, here. But we're real pleased with the work and every project. And I repeat, every project has been successful.
That's great. You know, one other quick thing too with Husein, you know, talking about battery technology, we were actually one of the first to do a solar to battery facility almost in the world at Babcock. We had just 10 megawatts, and that was with Florida Power and Light. By the way, I do agree with all you that hydrogen, particularly, you know, that's produced from solar energy is the future. But you know, we'd love to get off the grid. We'd love to be completely off the grid. And one of the things that we all have to remember is this battery technology that they're making for cars has to be ultra light. So those batteries are built to be very light so that you can get these distances. Whereas, you know, for storage of electricity, it doesn't have to necessarily be light. We should be thinking as you know, to be innovative, and our scientists and entrepreneurs looking at ways to store that energy and not have to necessarily worry about, you know, the weight, and I think they could bring down the cost and even make it more environmentally responsible to do it. So that storage of electricity to get us off the grid, again, doesn't necessarily have to be with lithium-ion batteries. So just something for everybody to think about.
Yeah, no, storage obviously is a very, very different from transportation. You got it right. You know, I think we're all focused on battery technology for transportation, and that's where I think we get, you know, you get into a situation where there are a lot of environmental impacts that has.
Alrighty, well, we have lots of questions coming into the chat here, so I want to get to some of our attendees' questions as well. But thank you for this rich discussion. I love the opportunity for you all to come here and have this conversation with each other also. Let's start out. We actually have lots of students on this call tonight. College students are very excited about this new growing climate economy and an opportunity to work in the for-profit sector while still addressing environmental concerns. So we have a couple of questions from the student perspective. This is to all panelists. What career or academic paths are there to explore these sectors when it comes to climate change? And this is open to anyone.
Yeah,
Well,
I think there are several. One is if they are interested in any of the engineering aspects of if they have engineering mind, I think going to any engineering program is one thing. But if they are entrepreneurs like Tom, they can go to business school. And there are school of entrepreneurship in FSU, and I'm sure other universities have. I think there are multiple ways to get to the same goal. I think we need only just engineers. As I said, engineers cannot solve all the problems. Engineers can solve technical problems. There are political, I think political science and messaging is, I think, the biggest thing. If somebody becomes an expert in media and messaging, convincing people what is the right thing to do, I think there are lots of opportunities there as well. So there are multiple disciplines that will help entrepreneurs to get into energy and generally environmental technologies.
Thank you. Any other comments on that before we move on?
I'll just add very quickly, I was formerly chair of the board of governors for the state university system. And, one of the things we focused on was student success, student outcomes. And, I think when you talk about research and the research dollars that our university system has been able to get both from a federal perspective and state perspective, it's really impressive. But one of the things that we always would focus on is for our universities to really look at and think about the issues that are facing our state. And if you talk around the state to even CEOs, one of their biggest concerns is water quality. And it's just really good to see that our universities, there's a new water school, for example, down at FGCU, that they're really focused on this blue-green algae, some of the issues that we're seeing, red tide, but we really need to focus on these things and spend the time and energy. And the solution is going to be innovation. It's going to be new technologies. It's going to be those things that our students are working on. And I'll tell you what, this world of ESG and companies really starting to think about their carbon footprint, I think there's a lot of opportunities for our students to not only study and focus on that, but to look at those companies that are really taking a step forward and want to do what's right for our environment.
Absolutely. I would say that more and more companies are trying to hop on board and move themselves more towards being environmentally friendly as well. So there's lots of opportunity out there.
Yeah.
We've got lots of questions about energy popping up in the chat. Let's go to a couple of you that work with solar and energy. So let's start with Dr. Pamidi, actually. Can you comment on the energy expense in creating hydrogen fuel? Is solar energy powerful enough to create large quantities of fuel and the energy that we really need in our everyday lives?
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a good question. Yes, there are already large plants, one being built in Georgia and a few in Washington state that produce a lot of hydrogen using renewable energies. Yes, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen is energy intensive technology. If we have to use fossil fuel generated electricity, that is no go. That's not a good thing. But if you produce electricity using either wind energy, solar energy, or other hydro energy, basically renewable energies, and it is plenty, it's not difficult to produce a lot of hydrogen. For example, the amount of hydrogen NASA uses even for one shuttle launch or one rocket launch is enormous amount of hydrogen. And that technology is known. And now the goal is to produce that hydrogen with solar energy. Yes, solar energy is sufficient because you're basically producing electricity using solar energy and you're using that electricity to produce fuel. And that fuel can again be used in the nighttime to produce the same electricity. So that is why it's called green hydrogen. Hydrogen is called green hydrogen only if it is produced completely from renewable energies and also transported using renewable technologies.
Any comments on how solar and hydrogen kind of work in the mix together to create more green energy? And that could be for you, Dr. Pamidi, or anyone else as well.
So there, I think federal government actually in a month time, federal government is investing $8 billion to create 4 or 5 hydrogen hubs, basically figuring out the way to generate hydrogen and distribute and create infrastructure of hydrogen for fueling cars or other applications. And they're planning on funding 4 or 5 because they want to use solar energy. That is one focused on solar energy to produce hydrogen, one focused on wind energy, one on nuclear energy, and on one basically using natural gas to produce hydrogen. So there is a lot of interest and the technologies are known, but all we need is finding entrepreneurs to bring these technologies to the forefront and to bring the cost down. And that is why federal government is investing, because it is expensive in the beginning to bring these technologies. So if federal government invests in technologies like internet, now it is very inexpensive, but it was very expensive in the beginning. So with federal government and other local government investments, the technology cost will come down to the point that it would become ubiquitous. And that is the goal.
So Kristen, I think it's Husein, you know, this debate about a climate change kind of green skinny bill in Congress, right? What is a big part of that is the hydrogen language on tax credits. And the reason for that is, you know, green hydrogen costs about $3 a kilogram to create, and call it plus or minus $1 for, you know, to develop a kilogram of energy that isn't from green hydrogen. So you've got about a plus or minus $2 per kilogram difference there. It's why you see in that bill a debate as to what that tax credit would be, because the goal is to shrink that difference, right? And as long as there's a $2 per kilogram difference in producing energy, you know, it's going to be hard to get the private sector to start investing. And then once you know, it's like any industry, once you have that tax credit come in, you'll see it unleash billions of dollars worth of private capital. That's really what then drives down that $3 per kilogram to produce to something that's equivalent to the dollar. And once that happens, I think you see a massive shift into hydrogen powered, you know, engines. And so, you know, we're actually testing it at a power plant in Ohio. We're the first company to actually test a hydrogen powered power plant out there. But again, that's not going to see full scale deployment until you start seeing this delta between green hydrogen produced electricity versus what, you know, commonly known as gray electricity.
Sure, thank you. And I've heard a couple of comments through our discussion tonight talking about dealing with regulations and you know, this cost delta and how the government may be able to help. We did have a question earlier about some of the setbacks or red tape working in the for-profit sector. How might state and federal governments work to smooth some of the processes for you that might encourage more better thriving climate economy here in Florida? Any ideas?
I think that it's just my idea. If governments, because we produce a lot of good engineers, but all of them don't stay in Florida. If Florida government figures out a way, if you get a degree from Florida, like our Bright Future scholarships, if you get a certain GPA in high school, you go to school for free in state universities. Similarly, if you get a degree in Florida, if you start a business, we'll give you a tax break for 5 years or some such thing to encourage our graduates, entrepreneurs to work in our state and to solve these big problems. I think that is one good thing that will help our state and also our government. And then second thing, I think if there are local externship opportunities in these environmental technologies, if state government creates a program where students can go and work in a small company and they get paid by government to learn these technologies and develop business ideas. I think those are the two I think are very good for our young entrepreneurs to get their feet wet and see if they like to get involved in these technologies.
You know, it's interesting. We're building a new city. We have just under 20,000 homes and 6 million square feet, and it is enormously complex. And I have, you know, kind of a good news, bad news scenario in that when we first started, what we realized is that government did not have an ordinance. They didn't have that playbook, if you will, where you could check a box that said new town, new city, and here are the things that you need to do. We actually had to create those things. And what we've also discovered is there was a lot of duplicative approvals that we needed to get. So, but there's a balance, because at the same time, you know, getting your water management district permits and going through the DEP and the Army Corps, whatever it is you need to do are important. There are checks and balances that need to happen. I think that, you know, when you have entrepreneurs and people that want to do the right thing, it's helpful if they can be almost like partners. And believe it or not, Charlotte County has been a partner with us, and they have stepped up and said, how can we've been very fortunate, how can we work with you to make Babcock Ranch one of the most sustainable new towns in the country. So when you have a partner like that, I can tell you, it just makes it so much easier, as opposed to, as Tom was saying, maybe Louisiana, which might be a whole lot more difficult. Makes it a lot more expensive, and it still is expensive getting through the permitting and approval process. And so, you know, having that be more collaborative, which is maybe just sort of a pipe dream, can certainly be helpful in being able to do the right thing. Housing can be more affordable. You can do better things for the environment if, in fact, the process that you go through is more streamlined.
Amen.
Great, thank you all so much. Tom, I'm coming to you next. We've gotten lots of questions about sea level rise, as well as questions about just the state of marine ecology in general. Can you speak a little bit to how your work has benefited the ecology of the areas that you're working in, on top of its benefits in erosion and sea level rise?
Well, first of all, our product, because of the way it's built, it's triangular with an open bottom in almost all cases. In Louisiana right now, we're doing a project where we got a solid bottom, but most of the time the bottom's open. So our footprint is minimal compared to, let's say, riprap and so forth and so on. The essential fish habitat that we get because of all the attachment and the ability for fish to have habitat there and grow is unbelievable. I mean, the attachment of the oysters are cleaning the water. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So it's kind of it's a secondary benefit to what we're doing. My main deal is to kill the energy so we can stop the erosion. So that's primary, but there are a lot of secondary benefits. As it relates to sea level rise, well, you know, if your property has disappeared because it's been eroded away, you don't have to worry about sea level rise. It doesn't exist anymore. So if we can kill the energy and we can, and we have a product that we can adapt and model so that as time goes on, we can adapt to sea level rise, which we can with our particular product. I think that's where the wind's at. It's portable, so we have the ability to move it. Okay, Scott Murkowski did a first project. One of the first projects he did for a very wealthy gentleman in the Grill, and the water was coming into his multi-million-dollar home into the backyard. He had no beach, he had no nothing. Scott put some wads out there we never identified a sand source. And within 6 months, he had 2 acres of pure sand going way out. And at a later date, the gentleman picked up the wads and moved them further out because he wanted to develop more sand, more beach. So our product is very adaptable relative to the issues relative to sea level rise. And we feel like it's very environmental friendly because of, like I said, the impact to the sediment below it. So, you know, it's win-win for us.
Absolutely. And one more thing about climate change, we have lots of interest in like the potential in this industry to help to continue to combat climate change or to combat sea level rise. Any other thoughts from any of you about potentials in this field that could continue to tackle the sea level rise issue specifically? Opportunities for any budding entrepreneurs out there? Oh, Sastry, you're on mute.
I don't think it's one technology, but anything that helps environment cutting back on emissions would slowly cut back on the sea level rise. And I think that is, you know, I don't think there is one technology that would help. I think it is climate change has to be addressed to address sea level rise challenges. Of course, what Tom is doing is great for immediate problem. But in the long run, you cannot keep doing this all the time. I think addressing climate change and global warming is necessary to avoid sea level rise. I think that particularly Florida areas, Miami, where they're low level areas, I think we don't have an option. We have to address this now quickly. And fortunately, there are lots of new technologies. And because this is mainly for entrepreneurs, I think there are a whole suite of technologies. Depending on their taste, they can explore and find something they like, including political messaging, business ideas, financial, and finding money, financial support for all these technologies is also not easy. So every discipline can play a role in fighting climate change and environmental challenges.
Awesome. So I'll bring this in for a closing question for all of you, if you don't mind. For students that are watching this, that are contemplating, where is my place in this? And am I prepared to enter into this new economy? We've talked about STEM and other backgrounds being helpful, but there's all of those intangible soft skills and characteristics that make all the difference between success and less than in these kinds of entrepreneurial fields. So for each of you, what do you think is one of the most important of those soft skills or characteristics that folks should cultivate in themselves if they aspire to engage in this kind of work?
Yeah, I'll start. I think the only requirement for being successful is passion. And I think if you are passionate about something, you will find a solution. And I think as a practical aspect, find an opportunity to get your feet wet in any technology or aspect you want to. So that is the best way. For example, maybe Syd will be happy if you want to go and work with him and help his company build townships. I think that is easiest way to learn the ropes around the technology, and that is how you feel confident. I think confidence is the primary thing after passion. So figure out, I think this generation is so fortunate to have all kinds of technologies and job opportunities. Go and do what you want to do for a few years and see how successful you are.
That's well said, very well said. I'll just add one very quick thing. And our business, the real estate business, is a business that likes to do it like everybody else. Comps are the big word. How's everybody doing it down the street? And for us, it's we want to be different. We don't want to do it like everyone else. It's good to learn as to how it's being done. But how can we find a new path and a new way of doing things, and then to not just talk about it, but to actually do it. I think that's the one thing that over the past 10 years that's really been almost alarming. Is I've been to a lot of conferences and there's just a whole lot of talking about things, but very few people actually do it. And I think that's actually starting to change. But to look for that new path, a different way to approach things, I think is very, very important.
Helpful. Tom, Husein, any final thoughts?
Well, I think I'll say this. I agree with the doctor in that passion is very, very important, but it needs to be combined with work ethic. And, that's part of what our younger generation needs to understand. You just don't come out and turn the switch on and turn it off. It requires, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to get your mind dirty. You got to get in the trenches. And if you got the passion for it, and I'm sure with Syd building a new world, it required passion, because you just got a bunch of land out there. Now you got to build it all up. So it takes passion, but then that's when the real work starts. You got to get in there and you got to dig and you got to learn. And I, as an entrepreneur, always look for fields that were wide open, meaning that kind of everybody needed it, even if they didn't think they needed it. Okay, so I looked, and when this erosion, this concept of erosion was, I didn't know anything about it. I couldn't even spell it, So when I saw it and I started studying it, I said, "Damn, this is everywhere." Okay, it is everywhere. So maybe this thing will work. Okay, and so you look at that, and then what do? You go to work. So I've always had passion, and then you got to have a good product. And you got to have good work ethic. And if you combine that as a student, you got a chance to be really successful.
I think there's reason for you to hope, Tom, because the students that Kristen's got in her program who I've met have really impressed me with their tenacity and their determination. So this crop is going to surprise all of us and blow us away. Husein, how about you?
Well, Tom, you kind of took a little bit of what I was going to say. Is we're talking about entrepreneurship. So I think the soft skill that you need is be prepared for failure. I think I think of my 11 and 8-year-old, right? And, one of the things that I constantly have to teach them is it's okay to fail and then try again. Because I think we're so used to everyone, getting it right the first time. Everything we're talking about, it's not been done before, right? That's why it's called entrepreneurship. The technologies we're talking about, we're inventing as we go, and you have to go into this realizing you're going to fail over and over and over. But the key is you may not be the one that actually comes out on the end with the solution, but every time you fail, people are learning from that failure. And as long as we have that mindset, I think we're in a great place.
I think about Michael Jordan not making his 11th grade basketball team. I just think about that. He's in 11th grade. He couldn't even make the team, but he failed. Look at him. Look what happened.
That's because Syd was defending him during that.
Different sport.
Husein is looking at some of my old NFL films. I feel plenty in that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, panelists, so much for your time and insights tonight, and for helping to shine a light on the fact that Florida's status as ground zero for climate change also presents opportunity for us to become an incubator for climate solutions. Across the state, Florida businesses are forging a new climate economy, one which strengthens both our physical and our financial resilience. And so to our audience also, thank you for joining us tonight. This first cohort of Florida climate entrepreneurs are great examples of what's possible, from transportation to energy efficiency, sustainable land use to renewable energy tech. We need enterprising minds to spearhead solutions that reduce carbon emissions, boost coastal resilience, and safeguard our communities. We know, though, that there are many more Floridians just like these in communities across the state doing the same. So to our audience and to our fellow climate entrepreneurs, if you know other climate entrepreneurs in your community who are deserving of being showcased, we're asking all of you, help us to identify the next group of innovators to profile as we grow this community. The nomination link is in chat or can also be found through Audubon Florida's website at fl.audubon.org and is shown here on the slide also. At that same link, you can also sign up to stay in touch as we create networking opportunities for climate professionals of all stripes. Wherever you are in this economy, you have a place in Florida's response to climate change. And now more than ever, Florida's environment is our economy. So meeting the challenge of climate change is an investment in our continued prosperity. Thanks again for being with us tonight. Again, I'm Julie Raithmel with Audubon Florida. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks for all of your hard work on Florida's behalf. Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.